Hey guys, Robbie here from the Big Red Express, episode 271 coming at you. This is going to be part one of my conversation with Mark Leonard, the chair of the Judges Committee for the IF3, the International Functional Fitness Federation. Huge thank you to Kayla Hartline last week for sitting down with us, and it gives you guys a little bit of a perspective outside the CrossFit world. I know I have a lot of the CrossFit style podcast interviews and a lot of podcast people, from the CrossFit world, but she is still in the fitness industry and she has a lot to talk about and a lot to dive into. So huge thank you to Kayla Hartline. I hope you guys signed up for that challenge. And if you did, let us know how you do. Not only, let's track it on her end, but let us know that you signed up for her fitness challenge, and we'll track you on our end as well. But huge thank you to Kayla Hartline for making episode 270 a very big success. Got a lot of good feedback on that. But this week, we've got a two-parter. This is a Tuesday, so kind of a little bonus drop. Episode 271 coming at you. We chat with Mark Leonard, like I said, the chair of the judging committee for the IF3. Here in part number one, we talk about we give a little hockey analogy with the judges, how judges at the IF3 level, the International Functional Fitness Federation level, maybe differ from the CrossFit style judge. We talk about a lot of the technical aspects, how things are going to be fair. And it's a great episode, and it's going to be a ton of information. So if you are available, if you can, take out a notebook, take some notes, because I guarantee you are going to love every second of it. But it was great to talk with Mark. I met him last year at the U.S. Championships, U.S. Nationals, last year in Colorado as I emceed. I will be back emceeing the U.S. Nationals this year. Hopefully going to be going across the pond to London to MC the World Championships as well. But man, what a great opportunity it was to chat with Mark Leonard of the IF3. He is the chair of the judging committee. But before we get to that conversation, we got to give a huge shout out to everyone that listens to our podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn, or you know what, just right out here on Buzzsprout. We got to give you a huge thank you for supporting the podcast every single day. And if you don't, you know what? We still love you, and we still want you to go to any of those platforms and click that subscribe button. Give us some feedback on what you want to hear, what you like hearing. Do you like me just flapping my gums, or do you like me sitting down and interviewing a lot of people? Got a lot of great interviews coming up, guys. This is going to be a two-parter, so part one's going to be today. Part two is going to be released as our normal Thursday episode. But if you guys are around, make sure you guys go check out the IF3. Get involved. I know the last, there are still time to sign up. I know we have some listeners across the pond in Manchester. That judges course is coming up, so make sure you guys get involved with that as well. Guys, also don't forget to go follow us on Instagram at big_red_express. Also on Facebook at the Big Red Express, and of course on YouTube, Spotify, wherever social media you are on, we are probably on there as well. Get in touch with us. Tell us you're listening. Let us know that you're out there, and we'd love to get that feedback. But without further ado, here is part one of our conversation with Mark Leonard, the chair of the judging committee for the International Functional Fitness Federation. Enjoy. Chatting on the phone right now with Mark Leonard, the chair of the judging committee for the International Functional Fitness Federation. Mark, first off, thanks for taking some time and chatting with us today.
Always happy to talk to you, Robbie. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, man, no problem. And I think one of the biggest things that I think, we're going to get into a lot about, the International Functional Fitness, that we'll call the IF3 for sure, because, for short, because all that's kind of a mouthful in itself. But talk to us about really, just kind of off the bat, how you got into the sport of fitness and then how you got connected with the IF3.
Sure. So, I had a similar voyage to fitness as a lot of people. I was hitting my early 30s and was getting fatter than I ever imagined, and had small children and didn't want that to turn over into the next generation. So I looked for a change and found a CrossFit gym located close to where I was in upstate New York at the time. And virtually overnight, my life was changed. It reset my priorities and actually helped bring me into this position because, about a year afterwards, I volunteered at an event, and it blew my mind seeing the possibilities that competition had. It changed a lot of my basic assumptions, particularly around judging, and that's what drew me into judging. And so, fast forward another few months from that initial event, I was at the opening combines for the National Pro Fitness League,
Okay.
as it was called back then.
Right.
And have just been doing it as a second job since then. So getting involved with the IF3 was a definite next step in that whole process. The opportunities that this has afforded us and taking a look at what our goals are, astronomical. So it's a pleasure to be involved, and it's real exciting to look at our future possibilities.
It's really cool just when you look at the broad spectrum of fitness and really just how much it's grown over the last 5 or 6 years, in the last decade, and the whole outlook of the IF3. You probably have maybe one of the hardest jobs in terms of the people that you put together as a part of your committee and as a part of the IF3 judging, because as anyone knows in the fitness world, in the CrossFit world, whatever you want to call it, the number one probably concern is the judging. How do you react to that? And it's got to be a lot of pressure for you to put together the best team, to put together, the best product for every single athlete out there.
So my athletic background growing up as a kid was based in hockey and baseball.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna speak to you in those types of terms.
Hey, go right ahead for sure.
For the American audience out there, and then we can apply it to maybe something that's going to be a little bit more applicable internationally. Hockey is pretty well known, so let's stick in that vein.
Okay.
When I was 5 and 6 years old, and I was involved in youth sports, there was a referee on the ice overseeing what we were doing. Maybe they weren't the highest trained person, but they had to be certified. They had to take a test, understand the basic knowledge. They had to go through some practical in-person testing, and then they're recertified every year. They're going to comps, various competitions, training seminars, as well as getting daily feedback on their performance based on what they're doing. So in many sports, we see this from the moment they walk into a competitive space, and it's regulated. It's not people that they're pulling out of the stands to say, hey, do you want to come do this? And in that model, you definitely get a lot of experience. You get some very capable, highly knowledgeable people, but
Right.
There's also a huge amount of variety in there and variability.
No doubt.
And when you're looking to legitimize a sport, and one of our main or our primary goal, first and foremost, maybe we should backtrack a little bit. Our goal in the IF3 is to bring functional fitness to the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. 10 years from now, we're looking to be part of that whole experience. So when you consider what other sports do and where we want to go, one of the keystone pieces of that whole process is building a legitimate judging, technical official core of judges. People that will oversee it, uphold the standard, and not have any sort of undue influence, whether it's because so-and-so is your friend, the person that you're out there officiating for is your friend,
right,
or your countrymate or anything like that. We really want to bring it to a level of professionalism that just does not exist today, only because our end goal is to do this. So that's a big piece. The second piece that you sort of hit on in your question is the implications of this. So in the U.S., we have certain assumptions in the functional fitness realm when
right.
it comes to when it comes to judging. You have a lot of volunteers that are affiliated with that local gym that might be putting on the event, or that maybe they run in the circle. If it's an annual event, they've come back. Word of mouth is that this is a good event, and so it starts to attract some people. But for the most part, those people are working for free. They're footing the bill to travel, to put themselves up, and then to be on their feet for 15 hours a day in the sun, and working for a free lunch and a t-shirt. In the grand scheme of things, that works under current auspices. But
Absolutely.
if we're looking to make this a legitimate sport, we have to look to what we have to do to professionalize it, paying people. In Europe, first of all, this is one of the first things that's really blown my mind, being involved with the IF3, is in Europe, that model exists. It's not out of the ordinary for an athlete's registration fee to include some percentage to go towards the direct payment of their judges.
Right.
And then that helps feed the whole ecosystem, because then you're allowed to develop additional courses and you can get better judges. You can move them forward in their career path to being a professional judge, to being a head judge. So that's essentially what we are working to build through this course that we're launching in next month when we go to Manchester, England, and then continue to build on that momentum. And then as we build into different programs outside of our sort of standard individual and team model, but as we look into a junior sport or adaptive athlete sport, those are additional types of courses that we'll be able to bake in, build that level of knowledge, and really have a professional core of judges across the world.
How has it been so far, the reaction that you've gotten from other athletes, from other gyms, from, other, people out there that may have never heard of the IF3, but they've heard of functional fitness in some case out there? Obviously, it's a very popular sport. It's getting more and more popular by the day. But what has been your kind of reaction when you tell people, hey, I am one of the main people for the judges for the IF3? What's their reaction, and how do you respond to any people that are just like, oh, that's just a biased, system, just like, let's just say the CrossFit Games?
Well, trying to understand what the IF3 is from outside of functional fitness world is a little bit difficult. Understanding what functional fitness is, unless you've stepped into the gym and maybe done it, or had a close family member that talks about it incessantly, you may not really understand. So the analogy that I go to is what we're doing in the functional fitness world is akin to the adhesive bandage industry. And if you want to throw CrossFit in the mix, we can say CrossFit is the Band-Aid of that industry.
Right.
So they control a certain level of marketplace. In the functional fitness world, I would say they control probably the vast majority of it. But
definitely, for sure.
Yeah, and so that's a little bit different than my adhesive bandage analogy.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're trying to standardize it. And so that way we have a governing body. We say, okay, this is the type of adhesive that is able to be used and is safe to use. And so that way we can govern the sport, because that is essentially what is missing. You mentioned CrossFit, but CrossFit is one example, and I just don't want to muddy the waters there. That's the only reason I say CrossFit
right
apprehensively. But what we're really trying to do is bring a governance to the sport, and not produce an individual event, and look at it from a global perspective and how to build it and reward people. It's not whether or not you participate in XYZ corporate sponsored event in order to proceed through their private event. Essentially that's what it is. It's a private event or competition within the functional fitness space,
right,
if you want to look at that way. So I don't know if I explained that completely well, but that's where we sit at the moment. No, I apologize. I think I lost track of the initial question.
No. I think it's good to get as much explanation as possible, because even being there, and we'll talk about the World Championships and the U.S. Championships and the different kind of qualifying to get to Worlds and Nationals and things of that nature here in a little bit. But I think it's important for people to really get as much explanation. That's why I wanted you on, because not only are, we're trying to get some more, spread the word about the IF3, spread the word about everything going on, but I think it's important to understand what the difference between, just a local CrossFit competition or a regional CrossFit competition and what this is going to be globally. It's going to be something that is going to be, it's going to be standardized. It's going to be something that is going to help the sport, in the long run for the better, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's functional fitness, whether it's, whatever you want to call it, it's going to eventually help the sport of functional fitness for the better.
So let's touch on that, because that's something that is really been mind shifting for me as well.
Okay.
So, living here in the States, we tend to have this bias,
right,
and think the functional fitness space really revolves around us. So having a greater exposure internationally, seeing the level of sophistication in their organizations, our various national federations, and now we've got 16 recognized national federations around the world, plus another 30 or so in some course of development.
Right.
So, look at that. That's
it's incredible.
That in a year, that's testimony unto itself. The other side of that is some of these countries are very small. They don't have a huge athletic footprint, but they do have something in functional fitness that they are doing currently, something that is very interesting and easily applicable in their space. We're giving them an opportunity to come in, apply our model, take our tests, the 6 standardized format tests that we're going to be developing and competing against each other with, and bring it to an international stage. Whereas you may have a very select few countries represented in an event like the CrossFit Games.
Right.
So you're going to have people that are coming from Germany and Russia and Mauritius and Panama.
Right. Countries that you've never even heard of before.
Absolutely. And it really brings them to a whole nother global effort of, bringing sport to bridge across national boundaries. In today's world, it's fun to be able to have a smile on your face and sweat, have that bond of mutual sweat, even if it's somebody that maybe our governments don't get along. But, there's that mutual respect that comes from having to exert yourself the way that we do.
Mark, how, every year things change, and obviously you guys have a rule book and standards and things like that. You have, you're essentially the rule book of the IF3, kind of like the owner's manual to what the IF3 is. Then you have a movement standard. How do you go along kind of changing with the times? Because obviously as the sport grows, as movements get more complex and you want to maybe add some movements, how do you, on your end, as someone that is in charge of all these judges, kind of adapt to that? Because, you don't want, as a sport of functional fitness, you want things constantly changing, and you want to constantly learn from either your mistakes or things that actually worked in the past. So when you look at the rule book and you look at the movement standards, how does the IF3, and how do you, as a member and as an important member of the IF3, adapt to the way things go? Because, we're in the year 2018. I can't imagine all the changes and all that the rule changes and the movement standard changes that are going to happen between now and, obviously the eventual hope of the 2028 Olympics.
That's an interesting prospect, because it's something that we've been working through in the last, say, 10 weeks on the judges committee. And essentially the way the process has worked is, we had a standardized list that was part of our documents for 2017, and we started from there. It has all the standardized movements, and then we each collectively brought additional movements that we wanted to consider.
Go ahead.
Some coming from the strongman world, coming from, we added swimming as another one, as one of our monostructural events. So there's constantly small pieces that we can fit into that. From there, we have a discussion, have any of the committee had experience with this, and so we can start potentially looking from a standard that was used previously in some other event. If it's something that we're applying from a different sport, then a lot of times we have a standard that we can work with, and if we need to lighten up some of the standards or maybe step it up a little bit in order to fit into our space, that's where our committee will talk about it and debate it. And then, ultimately what drives some of it is the execution of the event. So, earlier today, I got some of the early intelligence of what the programming is going to be. So now the next step is, now that we have an idea of what the programming is going to be, we can take a look to make sure that our standards are actually going to be executable when applied into that sort of programming, or is there technical changes that we need to tweak in order to have it make sense?
Now, so, are you a part of the decision making? And you can tell me if I'm asking too much, or if you don't even know. I mean, you may not know, but are you a part?
I know everything, Robbie.
Are you a part of the programming of the events? Whether it's each federation, or is it each federation kind of on their own for the programming for their kind of national federation, and then you guys only deal with kind of the world championships? How do you kind of bring the all the 16 federations that are official and the 30 that are out there in processes? How do you bring them all together into kind of one pool? Because instead, like, unless you're going to have the same workouts at every single international, qualification to get to Worlds, how is that going to be kind of even? Or is it just going to be like, hey, each federation, if they want to do a qualifying, has to submit workouts to us, and we'll go through the process to see if they are equal across the board?
So as far as Worlds go, we have an international level federation or committee that works within our federation, and they've come up with the programming there.
Okay.
So I don't sit on that. I am party to it just to make sure that I'm prepared for what we need to train people for. Is on the national level, this was actually something I was talking earlier today about, and it's odd that you bring it up, because I had that question. I said, whether it's making sure different countries are competing on comparable levels.
Definitely.
In meeting that sort of standard in order to get to an international competition. That is still something we need to work out, because we're early enough where there is, in some cases, huge amounts of disparity in just capability level and exposure to the sport. There's definitely some individuals that are not prepared to compete at some of the highest levels of what other countries are able to produce at. And that's something that is commonplace in Olympic sport. If you watch the Winter Olympics this year, you can see where there's people there that are happy for that experience. And that's something that we're okay with. We want top level competition, but we also want to bring as many people to that table as possible. So that's okay in that book. But the national federations it's onto themselves, but we are looking to develop some standardized tests so that it can be insert into individual competitions, whether at the international level, at the national level. And then we'd be able to determine some sort of record system so that we could have the excitement of breaking world records. This is, you defeated the international test one or something, you beat the world record for that. So that's something that we are definitely looking to incorporate, because that's essential, especially in an Olympic type of sport system.
And I definitely think you want to get the best competition out there for all the athletes and to make the sport more legitimate. But Mark, you know what? We're going to pause for just a second, because we've got to, hold on to this conversation until Thursday. That's right, folks. We are going to chat with Mark once again on Thursday. This conversation was just too good for just one podcast, so we had to split it up into two. On Thursday, we're going to be chatting with him about his experiences this past year at the first ever U.S. Championships and World Championships. So wherever you listen, thank you so much, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, no matter where you listen to this episode, make sure you tune in on Thursday once again. Guys, thank you so much. Until Thursday, this is the Big Red Express signing off saying stay fit, be healthy, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.